I'm pretty sure I'm in the majority when I say I was raised to believe one should never lie. The sitcoms I was also raised on tended to reinforce that idea, but with more hijinks than any Sunday school lesson or speech from a scolding parent. However, as one ages, one learns there is more acceptable nuance to this rule than Bob Saget or Tim Allen often conveyed in a 22-minute story. One example is an oft-repeated story of some actor or film crew person getting their big break by getting creative with their resume, usually through the simple action of answering yes or not correcting someone when an assumption about their talent is made. What you rarely hear are the tales of folks who follow that example and fail, or at least regret it for one reason or another. Until now, because that's what I'm about to talk about. I've been acting in films you've never seen since 2005, and as an indie film actor, I'll generally take any role that comes around, paid or not, because I enjoy the experience. Typically, I just end up working on projects for folks I already know. Filmmaking is all about networking, after all. But I've gone to a number of auditions I've found out about through ads in the alt weekly papers or groups online or even Craigslist. I've almost never gotten a role through this method, but one does have to keep trying. In 2012, I came across one such audition. I don't remember the source, I just know it wasn't a project I already knew anyone from. They first had me do a video audition, and then, apparently, liked it enough that they had me come down to a hotel in Detroit to meet the director and do a second audition. Don't worry, there was no couch, it's not that type of story. I did the audition, went home, and waited. Eventually, they contacted me and said they cast someone else for that role, but if I'm available, they'd like me as an extra for one day. I passed because being an extra sucks. Some time goes by and they contact me again because their first choice for the role I lost out on dropped out. They offer me the role but first need me to confirm that I'm available for several days starting tomorrow. They also ask if I have any stunt experience. Now this is the important part. Stunt work is a very specialized field of expertise and is absolutely no fucking joke. The only people who take their jobs as seriously as stunt people are pyro people and money people, and for good reason. An inexperienced person being involved in a stunt can be a liability and a danger to everyone involved. So, when a filmmaker asks you if you have stunt experience, do not fucking lie about it. Now, technically, I didn't lie. I believed I was telling the truth. After all, I had just finished acting in the amazing Cynical Man movie, where I did my own fight scenes, knocked down a door, and was duct taped to a wall. On a Hollywood production, these would have been considered stunts. They were not, however, Hollywood-level stunts. I had read the script to this new project, though, and I didn't think there was anything too outrageous for my character to do, so I said yes. It was pretty much all downhill from there. My first day required me to be on set at an abandoned factory building in Detroit slightly before dawn for hair, makeup, and wardrobe. Not unusual, but still annoying. I did get my own dressing room, which was nice, but when it came time for wardrobe fitting, I wasn't allowed to use it and was instructed to try on what little costuming I was given in front of the director and other crew. My costume was a vest, some shorts with more holes than pockets, and a pair of torn-apart sneakers where the tongue had been removed and laces replaced with zip ties. I should mention, this film was set in a post-apocalyptic world, so the choices did make sense. Making sense, however, did not make it comfortable. We were filming in abandoned buildings and outdoors in early November in Michigan. Anyway, my hair took a couple of hours to do, mostly because the hair department and the director kept arguing about how far to go with it. I had very long hair at the time, and the director kept asking for it to look more and more abused. At one point, arguing chunks should be cut or shaved from my head. Eventually, they settled on sort of ratting it out into tangles and smashing twigs and dirt into it. At the time, it seemed to me the better option than shaving, so I was grateful for the hair department's efforts to defend my head. Eventually, I walked onto the actual set and filming began. Mostly a lot of running shots through rubble outside and then through the decaying structure itself. There was one person in charge of marking out where in the building it was safe for us to be, since much of the structure was near collapse. While worrying more about the ceiling coming down on us, we forgot to clear the path beneath us, and on one take, the camera operator took a pretty bad fall onto the concrete floor. After that, we broke for lunch. The whole time we were shooting, I was running. I'm not athletic at all, and so was a little winded and my feet hurt. When I got back to my dressing room, I looked down to remove my shoes and saw that my right foot was covered in blood. Because of all the running and the shoe's lack of a tongue, the zip ties had been cutting into my skin the whole time. I informed the people that needed to know, since an open wound in the sort of filth we were running through could be very unpleasant later on. They cleaned the wound and threw a bunch of band-aids across my foot, since that's apparently what was available. The director had a fit because he didn't think it made sense for the character to have band-aids. There was some more arguing, and then I was back on set. Band-aids still in place, but much more running still ahead. It was now time to get into some of the actual stunt work for the day. My first stunt was to be chased by a ferocious dog. As a child, I was terribly afraid of dogs, especially the jumping, barking kind. I'm mostly just annoyed by them now, but on this day, with this dog, it was like being a kid again, and not in a good way. I was instructed not to approach the dog and not to look it in the eyes, because it can and would attack for real, despite being trained for this kind of work. I was then told to run away from it, and it would be set loose to chase me, and then another trainer would be at a certain mark to catch it. So I had to run fast because a real attack dog was really chasing me, but I couldn't run too fast because it doesn't look good on film. Thankfully, we finished that sequence without incident. We then moved on to a scene where I come across our main actress by a pool of water, kick her in the face, and then drop my pants with intent to rape. Right before all of that, we had to shoot a simple shot of me walking along and noticing her. We did a couple of takes, and the director just didn't seem to like what he was seeing, so he came over to direct me. He told me to really get into the character and to remember the character was a hunter-shaman, and I was to carry myself as such. So we tried a couple of more takes. Still not happy, he approached me with instructions again. This time, he told me to play it as if I were a dog walking through clouds. So, in my head, dogs are very stupid creatures that just constantly run around amazed by what they're experiencing, and clouds seem like a particularly wondrous thing for dogs to encounter. So, that's how I played it. Practically skipping across the wasteland, wide-eyed and mouth agape. The director did not share my interpretation of his imagery, and so we moved on, hoping the first takes were usable. The scene by the water also took longer than planned, since I had never done a proper stunt kick before and kept mucking it up. The added pressure of being informed by the safety guy that the pool of water was toxic and we should be careful not to actually get in it, despite the angle of the shot requiring me to step through part of it repeatedly with an open wound on my mostly exposed feet, did not help. Knowing that the next shot would also be the first nude scene I'd done also didn't help. Obviously, I knew about the nudity before agreeing to the film and even chose to expose myself in the video audition. But it's a very different experience when you're outside in 30-degree weather, in an abandoned structure, surrounded by 20 or so crew members and a camera, with a literal world-famous supermodel at your feet. I was a bit nervous, but by the fifth take, I was ready to just get out of that pit and so I got over it. Not that it mattered much, because the next scene was shot in a different pit within the crumbling structure. For this scene, I was expected to jump about 10 feet down into a literal pit of some sort and then engage in a fight with my nemesis before he knocks me down and stabs my eyes out. Now, stunt people know safe ways to fall 10 feet into a pit. They do lots of training to be able to do it safely and are in good physical shape to handle the stresses involved. I, obviously, am none of those things, but also have a severe fear of heights. An attempt was made to talk me through the stunt, but ultimately this was one thing I refused, and they put the stunt coordinator in a wig, and he did that shot. Up to this point, everything we had shot was on firm ground or on the concrete floor of the building. The floor of this pit, on the other hand, was actually a very thick layer of ash from whatever used to be done in the building when it was operational. It was also night by this time, and the only light source within the pit were the film lights, which were minimal for dramatic purposes. It was in these conditions that I had to fake a fight with a very imposing man with real stunt experience, method acting background, and a heavy Slavic accent, which made following his instructions through the fight quite tricky. Again, we were told that the ash we were fighting in was likely toxic, so we should try to limit breathing it in, but I still had to get thrown to the ground and have my eyes gouged out. Now, originally there was a fake head that was to be used for the stabbing effect, but the head had been created for the actor I replaced, and there hadn't been time to make one for my face, and so we had to do it the cheap way and put a sharp object very close to my eyes and then pull it back so it could be reversed later. And that's how my first day on this shoot ended, with me lying in toxic ash with a barely bandaged open wound on my foot and an angry European man holding a large blade very close to my eyes in the dark. I don't recall what time we wrapped, but it was well past a 12-hour day before I returned to my car and began the hour-long drive home. I arrived home late that night, tired, hungry, and broken. I literally sat on the floor of our bedroom and wept as my wife carefully tried to untangle the matted, twig-infested mess that was my hair. It was her birthday. I do not deserve her. I eventually went back 6 or 7 more times for this film. Every time was a different and terrible experience. Some days I would go through the makeup and hair process only to spend the whole day in my dressing room because they ran out of time before they could get to my scenes. Which isn't uncommon on a film set, but still frustrating. My stuff was shot in sequence, so my eyes needed to appear gouged out for the rest of the shoot after that first day. To create this effect, they used a particularly chunky mixture for the fake blood that was slathered and dried over my closed eyes. I was warned not to open them because the blood contained a silica to give it a particular look, and it could blind me for real if I did so. That was how I spent the rest of the shoot. Blinded, barely clothed, still hobbled by an injured foot, and usually being dragged around as an unconscious prop. All of this finally culminated on my final official day of shooting when I was very, very uncomfortably tied to a cross several feet off the ground and doused in blood in the 30-degree air as the first snow of the year began to fall. And when it came time for the shots of me actually being nailed to said cross, the audio guy said I gave him the best screams he'd ever captured. I went back for one day of quick reshoots, and then, thankfully, I was finished. I had to send a couple of emails to actually get paid, but the check did eventually arrive. I later learned a lot of the crew was not appropriately compensated. It took a long time for the film to actually get released after that. Apparently the filmmakers ran out of money and the director and producer, who had been married when filming was going on, had gotten divorced, delaying things further. It had a short festival run and I believe screened theatrically in 1 or 2 countries in Europe before going direct to DVD in the US. Nobody sent me a copy or invited me to a screening, but I did see it on a family video shelf once and got myself a copy through Amazon just so I could have something to show for everything that I had gone through. So, next time you hear a story about someone who got their big break by exaggerating or straight up lying about their abilities in some field or another, remember that sometimes the results can be conversely unpleasant.